In my previous video, an introduction to Jethro, or Yitro, I covered several points: his ancestry, his introduction to Moses, his presence at Sinai, and his subsequent journey to Bearden, and the encounter with Balaam, then to his descendants entering the Negev of Judah and settling there. Kenite, as we know, is one of the names associated with Jethro, from which comes the designation of Kenite. Genesis 15:19 is where we find the very first reference among many. Numbers 24:21, where we see Jethro at Peor and Balaam's address, which we just mentioned. Judges 1:16, where his descendants have come across with the Judahites and began taking possession of the land after Joshua had died. 1 Samuel 15:6, Saul is dealing with the Kenites and recounting their kindness that they showed the Israelites upon leaving Egypt. And then we have 1 Samuel 27:10. King David mentions the Kenites, who are still present and living in the Negev. And then we have 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 29, another mention of the cities of the Kenites. 1 Chronicles 2:55. This verse, as with almost all, contain quite a bit of information, all related to the descendants of Jethro, the Kenite. And as you may have heard this story at some point, but we're going to show the connections to Jethro here. It's a pretty famous story. Judges chapter 4 begins by introducing an adversary to the Israelites, King Jael and his military leader, Sisera, who is based in Haroshesh HaGoyim. One of the translations for that is the metropolis of the nations. Deborah is both a judge and a prophetess. She summons Barak, a leader of the Israelites at the time, and tells him that the Lord is commanding that they go up against the forces of Jael. Barak makes a conditional agreement with Deborah, to which she agrees, then informs Barak that the glory of the victory will go to a woman, not to him. They proceed with the plan that the Lord has directed. The story, or the narrative, shifts abruptly to a verse teeming with Kenite references. Heber, as we have shown in the other video, was one of the names associated with Jethro, and it says that he's a Kenite. We know who that is. Another designation, the descendant of Hobab, another name associated with Jethro, as we've discussed before. And if you're still not convinced, it adds the father-in-law of Moses. And Heber here just so happens to have pitched his tent in the area where the conflict was to take place. It's almost as if this verse were strategically placed in the narrative, just like his tent happened to be. Then after this one verse, we return to the battle. The forces maneuver into place. Barak leads the charge. Sisera's army panics. Sisera flees the battle. His army is decimated, and he winds up at Jael's tent, the wife of Heber the Kenite. She takes him in. He asks for water, but she gives him milk. And then Sisera passes out from exhaustion. She drives the tent peg through his temple. Shortly thereafter, Barak shows up, and she has him come into the tent, and he sees firsthand what had been prophesied by Deborah. Because of this one deed, the Israelites eventually go on and destroy King Jael. You may be able to read that here on this. Then in verse 24 of chapter 5, also known as the Song of Deborah, is the recounting of her deed. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of women in tents. As you can see here in the commentary to the right, The women in tense is a reference to Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, the wives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It seems to say here that Deborah is saying that Jael, a Kenite woman, is most blessed of these women, the wives of the patriarchs.